For 300 years, the Vikings ran rampant across northern Europe. They raided, they sailed through unknown waters, they clobbered people with axes. Their mythology has become one of the most storied in history, despite the fact that they never actually wrote anything down until much later. They've become a household name and inspired countless documentaries and movies. They've become a symbol of both brutality and ingenuity, a people that navigated seas, created complex trade networks, and ended the lives of women and children, and enslaved them. Let's take the good with the bad and check out the filthy secrets of the Vikings. Human sacrifice.
Ah, the good old days, when a person could be sent to the afterlife in the hopes that their sacrifice would bring a good harvest, or success in battle, or make sure the sun rose the next day, or whatever else that culture thought was important at the time. Lots of cultures practiced human sacrifice: the Egyptians, the ancient Chinese, the Aztecs, the Inca, and of course, the Vikings.
But just like your flaky friend on a Friday night, accounts of the scope and scale of Viking human sacrifices was pretty unreliable. A few of the accounts we have of it come from Christian monks, who thought the pagan Vikings were savages and were probably not too thrilled about all the raiding and pillaging they were doing in Europe. One description comes from a German bishop named Thietmar of Merseburg, an objectively excellent name and the next main character of whatever Game of Thrones spinoff is coming down the pipeline. Thietmar of Merseburg wrote a long chronicle of German history, and in part of it he described how the Vikings would meet up every 9 years in a place called Lierde in modern-day Denmark. There, they would sacrifice 99 people to the gods, as well as 99 horses, dogs, and other animals in order to ask the gods for forgiveness of their sins. They really loved the number 9. Another German monk, Adam of Bremen, wrote a similar thing, this time about an event at a temple in Uppsala, Sweden, where the Vikings again met every 9 years to sacrifice to the gods. Adam's account at least is a little less murdery. Only 9 people and 9 horses, dogs, etc. were sent to the Norse afterlife every 9 years at Uppsala, according to his writings. One of the most trustworthy accounts may come from Ibn Khaldun, an Arab traveler and author who traversed numerous Viking communities in the 10th century and is said to have seen a lot of gruesome things. In one passage, he describes the death of a young girl who was ritually sacrificed when an old woman known as the Angel of Death entered a pavilion and looped a cord around her neck and gave the crossed ends to 2 men for them to pull. Then she approached her with a broad-bladed dagger, which she plunged between her ribs repeatedly, and the men strangled her with the cord. Doesn't seem like a nice way to go, but for the Vikings, the gods needed to be appeased. Magic mushrooms. Psychedelic mushroom therapy is picking up steam in the U.S. The fungus is already decriminalized in Colorado and Oregon, and more states look poised to do the same. But while today magic mushrooms are used for therapy and for just making it seem like trees are talking to you, let me tell you, they had a much different role in Viking society. The legendary Viking warriors known as berserkers were known to rile themselves into trance-like state before battles. Accounts of the berserkers come from a few sources. One is a 9th century poem honoring the Viking king Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway who reigned from 872 to 930. Another was written in the 13th century by Snorri Sturluson, an Icelandic poet and historian responsible for writing and compiling the Prose of Edda, the most frequently cited source of Norse mythology.
Both accounts describe warriors who were mad as dogs and strong as bears who killed people with a single blow. They would bite their shields and eat embers from fires. Enemies' blades would bounce off their skin. A terrifying sight for sure. Now, I don't know what I'd do if I was on the opposing side of these guys. Other than wet my pants.
The berserkers started out with symptoms resembling body chills and shaking. Then their faces would turn red and they'd be sent into an uncontrollable rage, followed by a withdrawal-like come-down where they'd be fatigued and emotionally numb. There's been some uncertainty about what exactly the Vikings were eating that would send them into their war frenzy. For a while, scientists and archaeologists thought it might be Amanita muscaria, a red and white spotted mushroom that has curiously become a popular fixture in Christmas scenes with elves and Christmas trees. The mushroom is known to cause pretty violent fits of hallucinations, drunkenness, and drooling. It's not your average psilocybin shroom, not as hallucinogenic, but still pretty intense. Well, maybe not Last of Us intense, but you get the idea. However, another theory suggests that the Vikings got high on henbane, a common herb used since the ancient Greeks as a narcotic, painkiller, and anesthetic. According to Slovenian ethnobotanist Karsten Futur, the symptoms experienced by the Viking berserkers more closely resemble the effects of henbane. This seems to be backed up by discoveries of the herb in various Viking grave sites in Denmark, Britain, and Ireland. The hallucinating berserker theory is just a theory, though. The Viking warriors could have just as easily been all hopped up on alcohol, or the effects could have been brought about by fits of epilepsy or mental illness. We may never know. Iceland's trapped women.
Other women had a similarly horrible time during the Viking Age. In fact, most of the women who ended up in Iceland were probably what can sensitively be phrased as fornication servants.
An analysis of DNA from the residents of Iceland has revealed that around 80% of the men who originally populated the island were Scandinavian Norse. Makes sense, but for the women, it was a different story. More than 50% of the original women settlers were apparently Celtic, which means that they were from Scotland, Ireland, and England. These were places that the Vikings had been terrorizing for years, raiding and, well, stealing people. The majority of the women who ended up populating Iceland then were most likely enslaved, known as thralls to the Norse. Thralls were a key part of Viking society. They did all the grunt work in the villages if they were men, and taken advantage of if they were women. Violent mythology.
When it comes to the Vikings, the line between fact and fiction is very blurry. A lot of what we know about Viking history is revisionist because they didn't write much down. So the things we know about their culture and their leaders comes from a few Scandinavian poets and writers who put pen to paper a couple of centuries after the Viking Golden Age. So with that in mind, let's check out some wild Norse mythology that's just downright sinister.
Let's start with the Norse belief in how the world was created. In the beginning, the universe was just a big empty void, but then capitalism popped into existence and filled that void with all kinds of nice products like iPhones and skateboards and designer purses, so we wouldn't feel so empty. Sorry, got a little ahead of myself. According to the Vikings, the empty universe was eventually split by ice and fire, and then filled up by a hermaphroditic god named Ymir. Ymir became the mother or father of a race of giants, and a cow who licked stones to make some other gods. These other gods, who included Odin, didn't much like Ymir, so they decided to take his/her life and create the earth from his or her remains. Ymir's body became the earth. Ymir's skull became the sky. The god's blood became the rivers and seas, and Ymir's brains became the clouds. With such a violent creation story, it's no wonder the Vikings were so belligerent. Then there's the unfortunate story of Loki, the Norse god of mischief. At some point, Loki's mischief got the best of him and he accidentally took the life of one of Odin's sons. In retaliation, and there's always retaliation, the gods took Loki's two sons, turned one into a wolf, and the wolf god tore apart his brother. The gods then took the entrails of Loki's deceased son and tied him up in a cave where he is still trapped to this day. Imagine being a cave explorer and seeing that. What else do you want to know about the Vikings? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more nutty history.